Hello, this is Hui. Welcome to watch my video, C++ programming on Linux. In previous video, it has discussed basic proxy concept. In modern networking, a proxy server is an intermediary server that sits between a client, such as a user device, and a destination server, like a web server. It acts as a gateway, processing requests from client and forwarding them to the appropriate servers, as well as returning the responses back to the client. Proxy servers are used in various applications and networking, from improving performance to enhancing security. The example of previous video, we adjusted a C++ programming, converting a basic TCP echo server into a SOX proxy server using the Libevent library and the buffer event components. Based on position and the protocol date, proxy server can be categorized by different types. First is a forward proxy server. Forward proxy server sits between client and the internet. It typically passes user requests from internal network to the internet and used for access control, content filtering, and caching. Second, reverse proxy server. Reverse proxy server positioned in front of one or more destination servers, and it generally used for load balance, caching, and enhancing securities. Proxy server can also be categorized based on the specified data protocol called protocol proxy server. Protocol proxy server intercept and processes request and response in a specific protocols like HTTP, FTP, SMTP between client and destination servers. The common used protocol server is HTTP proxy server, HTTPS proxy server, socket proxy server, SMTP proxy server, and the FTP proxy server. The example of this short video, it will modify and convert previous video's simple HTTP server example into a simple HTTP proxy server using C++ on Linux. Here on our Ubuntu Linux, we have two C++ programs from previous video. One is called Evhttp server.cpp and Evhttp client.cpp. This Evhttp server.cpp, which is a hard coding, very simple web page for testing the web server concept. First, we test our program. We compile these two programs. Now our program has been compiled. Our executable Evhttp client and the Evhttp server. To test our simple HTTP server, we're using two terminals. On the top terminal, running our server, port number 1234. So now our simple HTTP server has started. Listening on port number 1234. On the bottom, we'll make a request using our HTTP client. URI will be, you can see our server received the request and the server respond back. It's a very simple HTML date. This is the server from port number 1234 and the host name. We can also test our web server using web browser. Here is our web browser, which is the type port number 1234. Here is our basic simple HTTP server. Callback function is my request reply, host name ubuntu.fibh.com, and port number 1234. Back to our Linux, we will create a new program. Evhttp http proxy server.cpp will copy from previous videos HTTP server and make adjustment, convert it to a HTTP proxy server. R evhttp http server.cpp. We start from main function. HTTP proxy server is a kind of HTTP server. It will receive HTTP request. Instead of reply back, HTTP proxy server will forward a request to the destination HTTP server, get back from destination HTTP server, then forward back to the client. So the usage will no change, and host 000 is in address NA. Port number from the argument 1, use event base new to get the event base HTTP server evhttp new. Set the callback function, rename this to the proxy, and we still not passing any parameter. Next, we are going to make adjustment request reply callback to the request proxy callback. Goes to line 35. Here is our callback function. First, we are going to rename it. The big difference between HTTP server and HTTP proxy server is HTTP server directly send the response in HTML format back to the client. HTTP proxy server is a gateway. It forwards client HTTP request to the appropriate servers, as well as returning response back to the client. So process of this callback is passing client HTTP request to the destination server. Evhttp callback function has two parameters. Evhttp request pointer REQ is a client HTTP request, while the pointer parameter is a customized parameter passing to this function. So this parameter can be used to pass main function variables here. For instance, event base pointer base. In this demo code, we pass nothing here. Evhttp library provides few Evhttp request get function. We can use them to get a URI string, request host in string, command type, parse the URI, which is object of Evhttp URI format, schema, port number, path, and query strings. These functions can be used for validate client request or apply customized logic. In this demo, we just get them print out on server screen, pretending to log network traffic informations. As we mentioned, proxy callback forward client HTTP request to the appropriate servers. First, delete line 52 to 65. 52, 65, D. Forward client HTTP request to destination server is similar to make client HTTP request. To make a client HTTP request, at minimum, it must has schema, host, and port numbers. This can be get from Evhttp request get functions. First, we decide if we need to rebuild connection URI string or not. If request host is non-PTR, we print a host missing message and send the error back to the client with HTTP bad request. If request port number less or equal 0 will be assigned the port number 80. It is the default port number for HTTP. To make client request to the destination HTTP server, it needs 4 major steps. Step 1. Initialize Evhttp connection object. Step 2. Create Evhttp request object. Step 3. Pass client original request headers and body state to the request. Make request. Let's go to previous videos example code evhttp client.cpp for reference. vi evhttp http client.cpp. Here is the previous videos HTTP client.cpp code. Step 1, making Evhttp connection object. The function will be Evhttp connection base new. And step 2 is make a request object. So we copy these 2 lines back to our program. We just paste here. To make Evhttp connection object, it requires the parameter base, HTTP host, and HTTP port number. Event base is initialized in the main functions. In order to pass base to our callback function, we can use the parameter to pass. We can also get it from the client request. First, get the client Evhttp connection object from the original client request function. If a client connection object pointer is non-pointer, log the error message on screen. Send the HTTP bad request error to the client. Next, get the base from these connections. Log the message on server screen and send the error message back to the client. We have a typing error here. Now we are able to initialize Evhttp connection object to the destination server. Now we are able to initialize Evhttp connection object. First parameter, base. Second parameter, since we don't use DNS. Now, third parameter is the host, request host, and the port number. Log error message and send error back to the client. Next, make new request. First parameter is a callback function of this request. We name it. We pass original client request to this callback function. Log message on server screen and send HTTP by the request to the client. We can delete these two lines. Step 3, pass client headers and body state to the new request. First, we get the pointer of new request output headers. We declare the input headers. Output headers is the output header queue. Input headers is the client input headers queue, and this is the individual input header. To get the input headers, using function Evhttp request get input headers, original client request. From first element, make a loop. Add input header to the output header queue. The header will be the key value pairs. Next, passing body data. Then we can make request. Connect to connection object, connect to request, command type, connect to URI string. We copy these two lines, rename this, connect to receiving callback. This callback function will process received destination HTTP server response state and then return it back to the client. First, print this message pretending we have a log message. Length is date received length. Get the client request pointer from casting the parameter. Create a new EV buffer, name reply. Get a connect to EV buffer, which is the response from the connect to HTTP server. To demo the proxy server, we try to print on the screen the response from the connect to HTTP server before we send back to the client. We pull up data from connect to EV buffer and print out on screen. And now we move the data again to the reply. Send this reply back to the client. Cleaning the memory allocate for reply. Now we complete, adjust, and convert HTTP server to the HTTP proxy server. We save our program. We compile our program. Now programmer has been compiled our executable, Evhttp client, Evhttp server, and our new program, Evhttp proxy server. To test our example, we are going to use 3 terminals and 2 Linux servers. On the top left terminal, it is Debian Linux, host name Evhttp, IP address 10.0.0.124. We will run our web server here. Port number 4567. Now our test web server has started on the Debian Linux. IP address 10.0.0.124, listening on the port number 4567. On the top right terminal, it is Ubuntu Linux. IP address 10.0.0.191. We will run our proxy server here, listening on port number 1234. Proxy server started, host 10.0.0.191, and listening on port number 1234. Bottom terminal, we will run our client, test our proxy server. To test our proxy server example, we are going to use one of very popular command line tools on Linux, curl curl. Curl is a very popular used command line tools and library for transferring data with URL, client-side URL tools. Using curl, the command will be -x, means we using proxy server, port number 1234, and the HTTP request will be port number is 4567. Proxy server and the web server is on different host. You can see client send a request through proxy server 10.0.0.191.124 and the HTTP request on the 10.0.0.124. Port number 4567. Proxy received the request. URI will be HTTP 10.0.0.124. Port number 4567. Forward this request to our web server, and our web server on 10.0.0.124 received the request from the proxy and respond back to the proxy with HTML format. This is the proxy received from the web server and forward back to the client. So the client side receives this HTML response. We can also use our proxy forward default page from the Debian Linux. This is Apache Debian Linux default page. Now we back to our terminal. We make our request through proxy to Debian Linux default page. Port number 1234 and default port number is 80. You can see proxy received the request, forward the request to the Debian Linux, and the Debian Linux respond back with HTML format date, and the proxy forward back to the client HTML format response. There's another very popular command line tools can be used for test our proxy example, wget. GNU wget is a free software package for retrieving files using HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, and FTPS. Using wget, the command will be write into the file test.html. HTTP proxy server is HTTP request 4567. We're using the manual E option, just so we don't want making setup configuration of a server. Now we send client request. Proxy is 10.0.0.124 and the HTTP request is on the 10.0.0.124 port number 4567. Our test web server received the request from proxy server and send the response back to the proxy server in HTML format. Here is the response from the web server to proxy, and the proxy sent back to the client into the file test.html. Here is the HTML proxy sent back to the client. Hello, this is Hui. Thanks for watching my video. Wish it helps, and it's going to be great to have your feedback.